Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Del. We're back for more fun and deep conversations.
Yes, we are. And I thought it would be the perfect time of year to start talking about the holidays and what that brings up for us. I mean, for a lot of people, it's getting together with family and friends, and we all have those challenging people in our lives that we have to sit next to during a celebration or something. So I thought we'd just talk about ways to navigate the holidays in the most graceful, loving way for not only ourselves but everybody else. Because sometimes we have these very strong feelings, and we don't quite realize how we are bleeding out that resentment, and it's really ruining everybody's holiday. So let's talk about that.
The thing for me about it, I mean, first of all, we are speaking primarily about the American version, which has Thanksgiving. Because if you're in England listening or some other part of the world, it's Christmas, which is further out. But the same principle applies. And I remember, been on this path for a long time, like you have as well. And I remember John Bradshaw has this famous quote about, if you think you're evolved, go home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And the premise of that is very simple. It's like, we think we've done all this great work. We're so conscious, we're so caring, so loving. Then we go home to family. And for some reason, we feel like we're 12 years old again.
Yes, exactly.
And all that stuff from our uncles or grandparents or somebody. And we just get so much in that old state of being, and we forgot everything we've learned. So this conversation will hopefully help those people who are watching to navigate with much more grace and ease the whole process.
Exactly. So you credited John Bradshaw for that. I thought it was a Ram Dass quote. I think Bradshaw borrowed it from him.
Maybe he quoted from him. I don't know. I remember reading his book or hearing it in a lecture or something about his, way back when.
Well, anyway, but it is the truth regardless of who first came up with it. Yeah, and exactly. And we're also talking about any holidays. I mean, I know Hanukkah, and there's a lot of other holidays around this season, not just the Thanksgiving, but it's the start of the holiday season. And I usually do a workshop specifically on this, giving tips and tools on how to navigate these times. And one of the things that I would start off saying, the most important thing is to just not take things personally.
Yeah, that can be a big ask, of course.
Well, it's
with family. That's the thing.
Well, when you understand that most people's behavior and reactions are based on the first, I think they say, 8 years of their life, and they actually really have very little to do with you, it's easier not to take things personally. It's easier to say, oh, I'm just reminding them of somebody or a time when they were younger where they really had a very strong reaction to that, or it was very upsetting to them, or something, and they're just, their upset is based on that early childhood experience, not so much on me. And that helps, I think, with not taking things so personally.
Well, the only caveat on that I want to say, and this is because of my own experience of this, is that is really great for us, and most of us have mastered those skills out in the world with our business relationships and everything else. But there's something special about family, where it's like where they seem to sort of have the secret key to get into our issues or whatever that is. It's like the thing is that even though we know how it works and we know how to be detached and have such grace in this flow, when we're around family, so often the experience feels like they don't seem to have an awareness that we've done any work. They seem to, they treat us so, because again, like you were saying, it's like that younger age point. In a way, some of us with our family feel like we've never had a chance to grow up, even though we may be very advanced in leadership and all the things we do in the world. We come home and it's all the old stuff when you were 3 years old.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, that's why I love this conversation, because it's going to really open up some possibilities for people, because it is something that we tend to not talk about.
Yeah. There's two quotes I'm thinking about as you're speaking there. One is, the reason why we get so triggered by our family is because they're the ones that place the triggers there in the first place. They know exactly what button to push.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the things. And then there's another saying is, you'll never be a guru in your hometown. And what that
Oh,
means is, it doesn't matter how much work you've done in the world, how much you've grown up or anything. The people that you grew up with will always see you as that first time they met you. And it's the same thing as their family. And I know in my family, I'm one of seven, and there are certain family members out of my siblings that it doesn't matter. One particular sister I'm thinking about, it doesn't matter how much she's grown and evolved. Many of the other siblings still see her for when she was this sort of a little bit
oh
of a bratty child. I'll even say it myself. But she
yeah.
has
Yes.
grown and changed, and some I see the change in her, and some of us do, and some of us don't. We keep referring back to 50 years ago, and it's like, no, times have changed, people have changed. It's okay. So
Speaking of that guru one, that's one of the things I'm very clear about. I wrote my book 10 years ago, and it's been out for a while, and people love the book and everything else. And I remember it's going back about a year or two after wrote my book, my dad said, well, you're going to send me a copy? It's like, somebody's, you're my son, you should send me a copy of your book. So I sent a copy of my book to him. And it's funny because when I asked him later on, 'cause he didn't say anything about it once he got it.
mhm.
I asked him later on, it's like, what do you think of the book? And he said the words he said were not bad, which for
Wow.
him is high, now, to be clear, for him that's high praise. but but it's so limited. And the thing is, what so cracks me up, and it's that point about being the guru in your hometown. I Around people who read the book, who know the book, they love it, and they say, give me great feedback. I've got testimonials, everything else on my website and on Amazon, but nothing from my dad will fit that. His perspective is like, well, you've written a book, I'm very proud of you, but I don't really care about the book. It's
Yeah.
it's an interesting dichotomy about that. He doesn't see me through that lens that other people do, which is what we talk about. Our parents don't see us that way usually.
Exactly. And I'm just thinking, well, at least he read it.
Well, that's the thing. No, 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 no. Let me qualify. I didn't ask him if he read it. I just said what he thought of it. So I don't know if he read it.
No, I know. I mean, I haven't. I've been in many collaborative books, and I have shared it with my family members, and some have read it and some haven't. And yeah, exactly. It's like I will always be the Dell they knew that they grew up with. They don't see me any
Right.
differently, which is actually really great. And I know a lot of people really appreciate that, especially when we become more sort of visible in the world, that we have that grounding that our family just sees as
Sorry. You said grounding. I'm thinking grounding or burying. I'm not sure which it is.
exactly. Well,
Yeah.
back to the point of the holidays. I want to
Yes.
share an example. My mother grew up incredibly poor, and we did too. Actually, when we were very young, we had very little money, and then she started making money. Probably when I started around 10 years old, we started making some money. But prior to that, our Christmas gifts were things that she found in the on the local rubbish tip, and did up for us. And one of my absolute most special gifts was an old Moses basket she found that she spray painted gold in that gold leaf, spray
Yeah.
can that we use at Christmas. And she lined it with green satin, emerald green satin, and she made me a sewing basket out of it because she knew I loved to sew.
Okay.
And I actually brought it back with me this last time I was in the UK. My sister found it in the cellars, and I was like, I remember that so well. I want to bring it back with me, so I have it here in my home in California now. But my mother, it was very interesting. Her memories of Christmas were so bad that she hated Christmas, and she made sure that she made everyone miserable over Christmas.
Yeah.
She just absolutely was seething depression and this sort of, oh God, it's all so over the top, and just very sort of really dripping with negativity. And as children, we all just had to sort of battle through and try and enjoy it. And I look at her and I think about myself and how I am as a mother, and everything I didn't have as a child, I relished in giving my children. So if
Hmm.
I didn't have a happy Christmas experience, I meant I wanted their Christmases to be so great.
Right.
or anything, bedtime experiences, not being read to in bed at night. So I made sure I read every night to my children to sort of make up for, and it's very healing to do that for yourself, what you missed out on as a child, to then do for your children, or friends' children even. So it's interesting. Some people can take their pain and inflict it on others, and other people can take their pain and recreate the Christmas they wish they'd had. So I think that's a
Right.
really important thing to look at. It's a choice. You have a choice.
It's true. There's another quote I'll throw in there, which is basically, "It's never too late to have a happy childhood."
Oh yeah,
And
I
it's that
love
context of that sort of thing. I mean, just speaking from my own experience when growing up when I was a kid. Now, coming from a Jewish family, we didn't officially celebrate Christmas, and I put it up to the fact my dad was too lazy to buy a Christmas tree that he'd have to clean up afterwards. That was kind of the joke my brother and I had about it. And so we had minimal decorations. We'd have
that.
Christmas dinner. I remember vividly having, like, remember in England, home in America, the Christmas crackers, where you basically have the thing you pull apart and you get a little paper hat, the
Oh,
crowns, all the thing.
we have
Who
them
got
every year here. You can get them.
You can't get them, but it was so rare in America. My mom would go Christmas dinners with friends over here, and it's like, "What's a cracker?" It's like, "That thing you eat?" Like, no, 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 it's a whole different thing. Anyway, the thing was is that I remember, this is going back several years ago now. A girlfriend and I were together, and we went to go see her family, and they were up in Sun Valley, Idaho, for Christmas. So I went up with them, and I didn't think about what was going to happen. But we went to Sun Valley, and we basically woke up Christmas morning. It had snowed heavily overnight. The sun was shining through the window, and this Christmas tree with a roaring fire, Christmas presents everywhere because her family had lots of kids. And I just saw visually I saw for the first time what a real, in quotes, a real Christmas felt like. It wasn't my Christmas; it was it was my girlfriend's family. But the feeling of it, with with the hearth burning brightly and the sun shining in, freezing cold outside, beautiful pristine snow, the tree, and there was like hot drinks for the breakfast, and this whole thing was like, it's almost like a fairy tale experience. But it
Mm,
kind of anchored in me the Christmas I never had before, and I sort of took it to heart as being a special place. So there is this opportunity to, I won't say have a do over, but to really do it differently going forward because we now have choice.
yeah,
So, like you were saying, so yeah, it's transformational.
it is. It really is. And the other thing I wanted to say is, we're all going to have those family members say that we they trigger us, that they for whatever reason. And I just think it's really important to talk about how to navigate that, how to
Yes.
not get triggered. And what I often find is curiosity is really an amazing
Yeah.
skill to have. I mean, we already know ourselves, we know our belief systems, we know our values, and sometimes when we meet somebody that has, and especially, I mean, my goodness, I mean, right now we're dealing with, some pretty horrendous world events. It used to be that it was just politically there was this massive divide, especially in the
Right.
United States. But now there's this whole, we have these wars, and we're seeing people having very, very different reactions and different belief systems to what
Absolutely.
not what's only happening in the Middle East, but still in Ukraine. People are getting tired of supporting the Ukrainians, and so there's a lot of issues that are going to be up for certain family members, where they're going to feel that they're going to want to push their agenda or their belief system. And I would say this is not the time to do that. I mean, we say in the UK, over the dinner table, don't talk about, what is it, money and politics and probably sex, I'd say. Well, it used to be that way when I was growing up, but maybe things have changed now. But what I would say is, if you do have a family member that sees things very differently to you, instead of forcing your viewpoint or opinion on them, if we have the mindset of curiosity and really just take the opportunity to try and understand what that person's viewpoint is, how they came to that viewpoint. You don't have to agree with it at all, but it's a perfect opportunity to really learn more about that other person, rather than be chomping at the bit, ready to, get your say in, and argue with them. So
Hmm.
I often say, just be curious. It opens your world up to being able to be very calm and centered in the midst of somebody that might have incredibly different views to you.
The piece of that that's so valuable is you don't hit them head on, which is what they're looking for. Oftentimes, if somebody's getting really clearly have a different viewpoint, they're almost looking, spoiling for a fight. They want to get like into a big, like right, wrong, you're better than type place to be. So when you approach them from a place of curiosity, I think it's beautiful because what you're actually doing is asking them why they get to where they got to. Because the funny thing is, and this is the part that's really interesting, is when you dig down deep enough and you ask them more and more questions that are invitational, not confrontational, but invitational, to find out what drives their viewpoint, you might be surprised to discover that what the source is for their position isn't so far removed from your own.
Hmm.
You find a common place there. And this is the thing is that we have got trained by social media, by life, by what's going on, to look at everything from the surface and not dig very deeply. And I'm actually having that with a friend of mine right now because she and I fall on different sides of this conversation about what's happening in the Middle East. And I've been asking questions that have elicited a different response than I expected, a better one, in fact, because I'm starting to see what's driving her viewpoint. So her viewpoint isn't about what I'm not against who she is, but the viewpoint's been challenging to me. And so by having this conversation of inquiry and asking, first of all, the upset emotions are dissipating, which
Hmm.
is a big piece. But secondly, I'm starting to see that the wounding she's carrying, I can relate to. So with family, like you're saying, that curiosity piece is a gift that can actually heal relationships in families. So it's a beautiful thing to bring.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It's and I think who was that? I'm going to misquote here, but sort of what was it? It's one of those Napoleon Hills or one of those old sort of from about 100 years ago when it was like how to impress people or one of those books. I can't remember it now, but everybody wants to be seen and heard and understood. They really do. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just the bottom line. And as I said, the more that you can approach somebody with curiosity, with interest, immediately that disarms them. Immediately they feel it puts them at ease. They feel that they're being respected, seen, and heard, even if you disagree with them. But just
yeah,
having that willingness to see them even deeper and then to understand them even deeper, you're connecting on a different level. And then what I also wanted to talk about, a lot of people are sort of, we call ourselves empaths and things like that. And, we really are very sensitive to other people's moods
yes,
and energies. And often, especially, I mean, I'll talk about myself, I mean, I identify as having spent most of my life as being a codependent. And I used to be very anxious around people that were upset. So I would take on the role of being the people pleaser, the soother, the calming down, and things like that. And what I really realized was it wasn't coming from this benevolent place of, oh, I want to make you feel better. It was like, I want to make myself feel better because I am so uncomfortable with this energy that I'm around right now, this anger or this upset. And and I just think it's so important to point out to people to allow the other person to have their experience, whether they're upset, wound up, whatever it is. We don't have to control their experience. We don't have to sort of throw a wet blanket on it to try and calm them down. Because in fact, often, as they say, don't say to somebody calm down. It's one of the most inflammatory things you can say to anybody.
indeed.
Calm down. So
Yeah,
in that situation, if you are somebody that feels the energy of other people very strongly, that you feel their moods and you start taking them on as your own, that is an indication for you to take care of yourself, not the other person. Not to try and, calm them down or soothe them or whatever. Just take a time out for yourself. It takes have whatever it is. If it means you leave the room, for a moment, just have a little quiet space. If there's something you do other than just downing another glass of wine to sort of self
indeed.
soothe, or
Self-medicate.
with more puddings than you would normally want to, or whatever it is you normally do to take care of yourself, but to really have that have that be the priority, that to self-care be a priority. Maybe it's
Yeah.
at the end of the night, you take a quiet moment, you go and have a nice hot bubble bath or something like that if you're staying with family. But to not push the situation, not feel that you have to be with somebody 24/7 and that you have to see eye to eye. That it's okay
Right.
to just agree to see things differently and agree to have some space.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say one thing you can do as preparation, so to speak, for this, because this the circle along the way is such a critical piece to do things that are self nurturing, caring. But this is the thing I suggest you experiment with if you want to try it for yourself. Is before you go to this gathering, where it is family or in laws, wherever it is if you're doing any spiritual work in the world, compassionate work in the world, where you see people from who they are, not what they do, in the way you treat other people, whether it's work people or anything else. If you can put that focus point on your family members and see them for who they are, not by the roles they play or by the issues you see them on them, but to see them beyond that. Because we talked this before on the show about how, we talk about these spiritual beings having a human experience, that we are in fact the same underneath all the wrapper and all the other stuff on top. But if we look beyond the wrapper and see the content of who they are, when we get there, it may be a little less easy to fall into the traps of being triggered by all these people's wrapping paper, for sake of argument. And
Mm.
so that idea of being able to see people through the lens of understanding, of caring, not to say that they're right or you're right, to see them as they are. So then what you said on top of that, to do things along the way that are self-care practices, even if it's like to go for a walk after dinner so you can clear your head, can be great things to do that just keep you in a place of centeredness, because ideally, quote, ideally, you want to be able to leave at the end of the time you spent with family at least as good as you were when you came there.
Or if, or even better, having received
Yes.
gifts. I mean, having gratitude for having learned more about yourself and other people. And
Yeah.
there was something else I was going to say about the. Where was it? Oh yes, when we was talking about with spiritual beings having a human experience. The other
Hmm.
thing that I think is really important to remember, especially going back to what I was just saying about most people's sort of reactive when I'm talking about when they're more in that reactive state, is formed from that first 8 years or so of their life, is to see when people are upset or rattled, to see them as these sort of, see the psychological innocence first. That they, in fact, that's their inner child has been activated, their wounded child is activated. And just as we would be kind to any child that's suffering, that you can actually have that sort of kindness towards them. It's not justifying bad behavior, but it's
Hmm.
just seeing where the behavior is coming from.
Right.
Often when people are getting very attached to their beliefs or whatever it is, there's fear. There's a fear base there. They fear that, again, I mean, a lot of children were not seen and heard when they were growing up. They weren't allowed to have an opinion. So now that they're grown ups, they can be a little forceful with their opinion because, they were, so they're sensitive around that area. So rather than playing into that old role where you shut them down, just see them as, oh, this person really feels they need to sort of shout their
Right.
position really loud to get heard and seen and validated.
Hmm.
I remember when I was pregnant, I had I don't know, I just had this incredible energy about me that I just felt like I was in this little bubble of protection and love. And at the time I was a costume designer, I'd be working with some sort of pretty highly strung, artistic directors that would have tantrums. And I remember I had this really beautiful, benevolent quality about me. I was like, oh, that's just this little boy having a tantrum right now. I was so easygoing. I just didn't take any of it personally. And I think it's because I was having my own baby. I really had this sort of like connection to this, that, that younger part of who they were. But going back to that bubble, this is another tool I want to share with people is, if you we all have our own energy field. We can call it our little, I'll call it my bubble. This is my little Buddha here for those that are watching on YouTube. Often use my
Hmm.
Buddha here. It's a little snow globe, and that's the Buddha within. That's our center. That's our absolute spiritual center, whatever you to have is your spiritual center, mine is a Buddha, and to just see that I have this globe all around me. And it's not an impenetrable glass globe like this. It's a membrane, but it
Hmm.
contains my energy. And everybody has that around them. And sometimes, they can come close to you and your energies can touch and the membranes touch, just like when you're blowing those bubbles that children blow. Sometimes some bubbles connect to each other. You can still see the line between them. But they've just sort of stuck together. And sometimes if you're in simpatico with somebody, you can have that. You can, your membranes can touch and you can feel each other and everything's good. And there are some times when your energy and their energy is not sort of simpatico. So I often
Right.
see myself in that stage as in my little bubble. I'm contained. I'm not spilling out everywhere and infecting those around me. I'm just contained in my lovely little bubble, my own well-being. And I see them in their bubble. And if they're behaving in a certain way that is feeling intrusive or damaging or harmful, I sort of just blow their bubble away a little bit. I just have a little bit of distance with their bubble, and I see it sort of just disappearing off a little bit further away from me. And those that are in feel good to me, I allow a little closer. But it's a really good way to energetically not start fusing with each other and getting into that entanglement and having those emotions just start sort of they're going off on one and you're going with them because you're trying to control them, or you feel that you can't separate from their energy. So I think that's always a really good visual to have, is that you are in your own beautiful little contained bubble of well-being and they're in theirs, and move them away if they're a little, intrusive, and bring them a little closer if they feel good.
I like that. The thing that it brought to mind was something that's slightly different, but on the same level. Because the thing is, the idea of the bubbles is a great way because it keeps you create boundaries which are healthy, which is a vital piece of this. Um, the one I was thinking about is also is if you want to play this game of being spiritual in terms of playing the idea of being conscious and aware, is if that's something that's true to you and what you value for yourself, is to really make that your MO, so to speak, your modus operandi, your way of being. So when you go around family, you do your best to maintain that space. Because what happens is when you can maintain that space, you don't get hooked up in the judgments. So you do keep that boundary the same way. What you can do is discover for yourself that you can actually see them through that lens. And when you do, again, like I said earlier about you get beyond the behavioral stuff, is you can be, I mean, it's about light bearers and light bringers, that sort of thing in the spiritual realm. Well, in reality, when you're around family, you can do that energetically and be. It's almost like having Teflon in a sense, because the more that you're in the place of really knowing yourself and caring and loving yourself, those usual hooks and attacks that come from family members that are like Velcro usually just fall away because you don't take it personally. We talk about in this work about, you don't, you really learn, and it's actually one of the 4 agreements about not taking it personally. If you can do that with family, you are so far ahead of the game because it's the hardest one to work through. So in some ways, you can take your visit home as an assignment to practice this level of being immune to taking things personally. Now, you may not make it through the whole time, but if you start with that intention, maybe after a few years, you'll get better at it.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. I just want to finish on this note is know your limitations. And
Yeah,
if you know that you are going to get triggered by whoever it is, especially if you happen to have a narcissistic parent who has no boundaries and starts telling you how to live your life and criticizing
yes,
you and everything like that, number one, nobody says you have to be with them. You have a right, you're a grown up, you can do what you want. And
yes,
number two, if you do feel that you want to be with them, you don't have to be with them for an extended period of time. You are in control of how much time you want to spend with somebody, and having
yeah,
that healthy boundary and having that ability to pop in, be gracious, be loving, and get out. It's okay to do that. You know,
very smart move. Yeah,
yeah, it really is. So that's what we've got for this week. I'd love you to all join us next week. We're going to be talking about loneliness around the holidays and
yeah,
tips on how to handle that, because not everybody has challenging, difficult families to spend time with. A lot of people are
very true.
very lonely over the holidays. So let's talk about that next Thank you, everybody, for joining us again. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
Harry, for another great
Thank you, Del.
conversation.
Look forward to speaking to you next week and seeing everybody joining us next week as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.